my hopes were pretty low in the fact that this would actually work. The test was a digital test and it came back negative. It said not pregnant. Hi guys, welcome back. I just put the twins down for a nap, so I thought now would be a good time to kind of reintroduce myself for anybody new here and to kind of go over and tell my IVF story. I haven't exactly told it. I mean, I've shared online to family and friends via Facebook, but I haven't exactly kind of went into detail on the whole process and how much it took out of my husband and I and what it took to get our two beautiful girls. So if you're new here, my name is Tanya Rendon. I am a mother to two beautiful twin girls that were conceived via IVF. And I mean, this is our story, my story, on how we got them. And it's probably gonna be a really emotional story. I'm gonna try not to cry, but it'll probably happen. It was really hard mental, and I'm almost about to cry now, but it was really hard physically and mentally on myself. And I never actually asked my husband how it impacted him. So I'm assuming it was just as mentally and physically draining on him, not knowing, because I feel like that's the hardest part of IVF, is just not knowing whether or not you're going to reach the end goal of becoming a parent. So let's get into it. My husband and I married in, excuse me, let me collect myself. Can't believe I'm already crying. But my husband and I married in 2007. We kind of knew right off the bat that there were going to be problems and we were going to have to seek medical intervention on conceiving. Kind of long story short, we were never really careful and nothing really came of it. When we started to try back in 2007, things just never got there. So I ended up seeing a doctor back in Colorado, kind of just checking everything and seeing if there was anything physically wrong with me that they can see right off the bat. I had an HSG done to make sure my fallopian tubes were open. Nothing really alarming with that. They said that it was slightly hard to get through, but nothing that should have prevented pregnancy. And then they threw Clomid at me. And at that time, I was terrified of what I had read online about Clomid, the side effects, and everything that you would go through with that. So I decided not to take the Clomid. We kind of decided to back off and just kind of live life, see how things went, and just leave it up to God and, you know, see what happened. Fast forward to 2022, nothing had happened. Obviously, nothing had happened. One day I was at work and I was talking to one of my coworkers, and she was saying that she, you know, had to seek medical intervention because she wasn't able to conceive. And I was like, you know what? I'm in the same boat as you, but I haven't went back to the doctors. And at this time we were new to Texas, so I hadn't found an OB at that point. You know, I asked her who her OB was because I kind of, at that point, I was getting older and, you know, we had been trying for so long and nothing had happened, and it was starting to weigh on me that like nothing was happening. And I decided to go see her OB, get lab workup done, and see if there was anything wrong. At that appointment, they just did blood work, you know, typical routine workup, pap smear, you know, you name it. And we got called in, my husband and I, to kind of go over my lab results. There was nothing physically wrong with me that she could see. Excuse me. Let me collect myself again. There was nothing physically wrong with me that she could see. So she referred us out to a fertility clinic in Plano, and we decided to go see them. That was my first fertility clinic. We actually did not stay with them through the IVF process, because I'll get into that in a little bit. But we went to go see a fertility clinic in Plano. They also did, testing. They did an HSG to check my fallopian tubes to make sure they were still open. They did ultrasounds to kind of check everything in there. I do have polyps, but that was never anything that should impact us conceiving. I had multiple doctors look at that, and there was nothing that required surgery to get rid of that. Fallopian tubes were open, labs were normal from what they can tell, so we pushed into IUI. I wish we would have known at the time that IUI, and I should say we did know at the time that the chances of conceiving via IUI were lower, but we were kind of hoping that that would, be it for us. It would be, one IUI treatment and done. That was not the case. We ended up doing 3 IUI treatments. The last cycle, they actually gave me Gonal F to try and stimulate my ovaries to produce more eggs. But my body did not respond to that. So we had 3 failed IUI cycles, and we decided at that point that we were going to push into IVF. We got pricing from the clinic. It is insanely expensive to pursue IVF. At that point, we financially could not fully afford IVF, and I started looking into alternatives to be able to afford IVF, which meant insurance. And I found groups on Facebook. There's, companies out there that offer insurance that cover infertility treatments. So I ended up getting a second job because I was working full-time at this point. Ended up getting a second job at Tractor Supply to cover IVF. I had to work there for at least a month in order for my benefits to kick in. So that pushed us into 2023, which was really hard, postponing going into IVF treatment just after researching it, knowing how long that it would potentially take, to possibly conceive or not conceive. So that pushed us into 2023. And at that point, I hated working that second job. I was so blessed and so fortunate, but my mindset was just pissed off at the world, pissed off at life for handing us, these cards that we were dealt. Ugh. Recollecting myself. I was also pretty emotionally spent at that point after 3 failed IUI cycles. My hopes were pretty low in the fact that this would actually work. I started diving into, forums, and I started watching YouTube videos of people, and, they struggled with the IVF process and, conceiving on the first one. So I started doubting that IVF was going to be the answers, to our thousands and thousands of prayers. But fast forward a little bit, we found a clinic that accepted our insurance, and we decided to seek IVF treatment through that clinic. I went and you do your initial consult, they kind of talk to you. It took us a couple of months to get in to be seen, because they had such a backlog of people who are waiting to be seen for fertility treatments. So I think we had to wait, a couple months in order to even be seen to see if, we can do IVF, or if IVF was going to be the next step for us. At that point, I did have to redo testing, so I did another HSG. So at this point, I was at 3 HSGs, nothing wrong. I also did a hysteroscopy, which was probably one of the most painful things that I have ever felt. did blood work. Upon blood work, Derek had to do blood work to make sure everything was right. Had to do analysis of, you know, his stuff to make sure things were good there. There is nothing wrong with him. It's me. But realistically, there's nothing wrong with me either that they can actually pinpoint or see. So we ended up seeing this fertility clinic. We went into stims as soon as my body would allow. Stims was probably, you know, one of the most draining times, physically and mentally. Again, it's really hard on your body, your mental state. Overall, it's just hard. I was on 2 shots every day for, I believe it was a week. And then in order to stop my body from ovulating, I had to take a 3rd shot the closer that we got to egg retrieval. And then you have your trigger shots. So it was shot after shot after shot. And at this point in time, I hated shots. I was terrified of shots. When I grew up, you know, the nurse had to hold me down in order to give me shots. But by the end of all this, I was giving myself shots. So we ended up doing 1 egg retrieval. You know, our numbers weren't great. I was used to seeing everybody online and on social media with, you know, 20 plus eggs, and that just wasn't our reality. We ended up with 2 viable eggs that, you know, fertilized, that were PGTA tested, and I was worried. I was worried that, you know, we may be going through multiple transfers and, you know, we may run out. So we decided ultimately, which was a really hard decision at the time because I wanted to go straight into transfer. We decided to do a 2nd egg retrieval because my insurance allowed for 2 retrievals, 1 transfer. So we decided, which was, in the end, it was the best decision that we could have made. So we ended up going into a 2nd egg retrieval. They upped my stim medication, so I was even more exhausted on my 2nd round of stims than I was my 1st round. The Menopur was god awful. We found that the best method was for me to inject it myself. For some reason, when Derek injected, it just burned like crazy, and I was just brought to tears because it hurt so bad. So we ended up doing our 2nd egg retrieval. That one didn't go as planned. I had gone to my appointments to kind of check how things were going, you know, how many follicles I had, and they were having problems seeing my left side. So they can kind of give an estimate on how many were there, but they were having problems kind of seeing everything. Well, fast forward to the actual retrieval, you know, everything with that went great. I came to, the doctor wanted to come talk to me, which we kind of knew, a little weird, but turns out they weren't able to retrieve any from my left side because my ovary was in the way. They would have had to poke through my uterus, which they didn't want to do. So we retrieved none from my left side, which we had, remember, upped my stim medication to hopefully get more this round because this was our last round that was covered by insurance, and they were only able to retrieve from my right side. Now, thank goodness we had upped my medication because we ended up getting about the same that we received from our 1st retrieval, minus being able to get from our left side. So everything that we got was from the right side. So we sent those off. The numbers started dwindling quite a bit. So that was really hard to see because we went into the 3rd one hoping that we would get more just in case, you know, our 1st transfer or 2nd transfer, 3rd transfer didn't work. So, you know, we ended up with 1. GTA tested, we came out with 1. So we have a total of 3 embryos to transfer. After my retrieval, we decided to go ahead and move into transfer. My clinic recommends frozen embryo transfers because it just kind of gives your body some rest, which my body needed. I was pretty run down at the time. I was working 2 jobs. I was exhausted. I was, you know, making up time at my primary job. Thank God I had, you know, one of the best bosses that, you know, allowed me to go to these appointments and just kind of make up my time and not use PTO. So I'm very thankful for that. So we waited about a month before we were able to start the process for our frozen embryo transfer. I started medication. I believe I was on birth control, and then I switched over to estrogen when my body was ready, and then I was scheduled to go on progesterone. We had received our transfer date, which was to be August 24th of 2023. But I was a little excited, a little nervous because my birthday is on the 28th, so I would likely know by my birthday if I was pregnant or not. So it would either be a really good birthday or a really terrible birthday. But I ended up having a bad reaction to the estrogen that I was on. My body was breaking out in hives. I was red. I was constantly itchy. So I reached out to my doctor at the fertility clinic and kind of let him know what was going on. And we ultimately decided to stop estrogen, stop medication, and postpone a month. That was really hard because I was already ready to go. My mind, you know, we were all in, excited, ready to go. We had our transfer date set, and to have to stop medication and make that decision and push things back a month was really rough. You know, I'm sure most women and most men who go through infertility and go through fertility treatments do the same thing, but I was, you know, calculating when we would be able to tell our friends and family that we got pregnant. I was, you know, counting when we would, you know, give birth, when, you know, each milestone would happen. You just kind of plan on, you know, everything. You get your hopes up and you're excited. And it was really tough to have to pull back and say, my body is not ready. If I go into this transfer, we may lose this embryo, and I'm probably gonna regret it and blame myself even more if I don't wait. So we ended up waiting. And I'm so thankful that we did, and I'm so glad that we did, because we gave my body time to rest and recover from, you know, the negative impact that I was having from estrogen, which is super weird in itself that I was having a negative side effect anyway. But we decided to do a modified natural transfer, or modified natural and frozen embryo transfer, which my body actually responded to much better. We had our date for the modified frozen embryo transfer set for September 25th. And that was also exciting because our 6-year wedding anniversary was going to be on the 30th. So we would again likely know on a big memorable date of ours. So it'd either be a really good anniversary or a really bad anniversary. And that's if I tested early. Fast forward to our frozen embryo transfer. Everything went well. We transferred one embryo, which was one of our baby girls, and we hoped and prayed. I had been doing acupuncture treatments, so I had went to a acupuncture appointment that morning before the transfer. I had done it all leading all the way up to my transfer. So, and I fully believe that acupuncture did help a lot as well, as just kind of changing my mindset before the transfer. I just, you know, left everything in God's hands and said, whatever happens, happens, and it's out of my control. I had an acupuncture appointment before my transfer that morning, so after my appointment, went home, rested for a little bit, and I actually hopped on a flight to Denver because at the time Derek was traveling for work, and I had not done the progesterone shots myself, so I was still having him do those for me. So I hopped a plane with him to go to Denver because he was traveling for work, and I was needing his help to do the progesterone shots. So I was a little worried about travel and just having the transfer, but I kind of just left everything in God's hands and said, you know, what will be is going to be, and I have no control over this. I stayed out there, I believe, for about 3 days and then came back, and I had tested early. Do not recommend to test too early, but I tested at 4 days past embryo transfer. It was negative. 4 days is super early. I started getting in my head. My husband was pissed because he told me not to test early. I had already known that I was going to test early. This is the one thing that he did not want me to do, was test early, because you know, you kind of get down in the dumps. You start Googling, you start spiraling out of control. It happened when we were going through IUI. It happened when we were going through just trying to conceive naturally. So I was a little down in the dumps. You know, 4 days was pretty early. So I kind of, you know, brushed it off. And the next day was our anniversary, and I decided to test again. I did not learn my lesson, but I tested again, and I got my first positive pregnancy test. So surreal. I did not record it. I wish I did, but I got my first positive test. I had tested without Derek, so he didn't know, and I had texted my best friend Nicole and told her. So she was actually the first person that I told. And then I went out to Target and I got a little baby dress that had stars on it. It was like a pink little dress and it had stars, because my husband really loves space. But went out to Target, got that, and came back, and I recorded his reaction, which I'll insert here. But we found out we were pregnant on our 6-year wedding anniversary. So, you know, super memorable day. Will always be super memorable. So that was exciting. You know, super surreal. Didn't think it would ever happen. Was terrified that it wasn't gonna stick. Just overall terrified. I don't know what it is, but because I was terrified of losing the baby, I was testing, I believe it was twice a day at that point, and I had taken a test in between my first beta and my second beta, and the test was a digital test and it came back negative. It said not pregnant. My heart sunk. That was the last test that I had, and I started to spiral. Went to my husband, told him this came back not pregnant. We need to go get another pregnancy test. We went out, we got a couple more, I believe it was like 2 or 3 more boxes of pregnancy tests. And I took another test and it was positive. But in the meantime, I had still called my fertility clinic, said, hey, I took a test, it said negative, can I get another beta in, or can I move my beta up? So we ended up moving the beta up. You know, after taking another test, it put us a little at ease, but still went in for a beta. Numbers were still going up normally, they were still great. Nothing crazy, nothing out of the ordinary. Fast forward, we're due our 6-week checkup, but we find out that there are 2. The embryo split, and we have 2 baby girls and not 1. Obviously identical because we only transferred 1 embryo, but so very blessed. So very blessed, because we went from not knowing if we were ever going to get pregnant, not knowing if our first transfer would work, worrying about, you know, if our first transfer stuck because we had that pregnancy test that came back not pregnant, to 2 beautiful baby girls. So I started crying. Derek was in shock. I had called it because I just had this feeling that I should be saying babies and not baby. We were ecstatic. We couldn't keep it a secret, because I had been talking to people, you know, talking to friends and family, and they had known we transferred. I told my sister, oh, there might be 2 babies in there. So when we found out, we told, you know, friends and family. I sent a little picture of the little peanuts that the ultrasound showed. But yeah, we were excited. Derek's mom was super excited because she's actually an identical twin. We went from not knowing if our fertility treatments were going to work, not knowing if we were going to be parents, you know, not knowing what the future held, to 2 beautiful baby girls, which we are so blessed. You know, it was a pretty easy pregnancy considering I was high risk. I had so many doctor's appointments. Towards the end, I was admitted into the hospital because there was reduced fetal movement, but it was more out of precaution because the babies were showing, you know, signs of being okay. And I delivered at 36 weeks one day via C-section. They came out, they had no NICU time, they were perfect. So we are completely blessed to have 2 beautiful girls, to have a successful IVF story on our first round, and our first transfer. And I know that's not everybody's story, and I feel for anybody who's still going through fertility treatments and who is unsure about what the future holds, because it is mentally and physically exhausting, and nobody understands what you're going through, and it's very lonely. So I feel for you, and baby Dusty your way. I hope you get your happy ending, because I know we got our happy ending, and I want everybody to, you know what that feels like. But yeah, that is our IVF story. And if you have any questions, or want to know more, you want to know our birth stories, or want to know more about the IVF process, or want me to go into more detail on anything, just drop it down in the comments and let me know. But yeah, thank you for joining me on my IVF story. Sorry for the tears. I'm surprised I got through it without more tears, because it was a very tough time in my life, and it changed me. And even thinking back on everything that we've been through, I still have a hard time with it. I'm in therapy, still processing everything. So, but if you have any questions, please let us know. Speaking of, the girls are starting to wake up. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop the question in the comments. More than happy to make a response video or just respond to your questions. But thank you for joining me for my IVF story, and I hope you enjoyed.